I think natural theology, which is really the attempt to make a link, if you like, or a pathway between the natural world and God, is very exciting, and it's something we find in Scripture itself. But of course, these things can go wrong. For me, one of the worst things that can go wrong is that you fall into what I call the God of the gaps approach. In other words, science can't explain this, so that's where faith comes in, so that sorts it all out. And of course, that's silly, because A, it confines God to gaps, which is ridiculous, and B, those gaps will contract over time.
My own view is that we are in a creation, and that creation is, as we would say amongst philosophers, ex nihilo, that is out of nothing. And I would also go further than that, which is within, I believe, at least Christian orthodoxy, that God sustains the world continuously. If, impossibly, he was metaphorically to take his mind off things, we wouldn't be here. We are genuinely created. But one has to be fantastically careful, especially if you're a scientist, because it would be very tempting, for example, to say, well, the Big Bang is that moment of creation ex nihilo. Well, I'm not a physicist, but I'm sufficiently conversant with science to be very, very careful about using those arguments. Science always changes. What appears to be irrefutably correct is usually not wrong, but is seen through new lenses as we progress.
I think we can't find out a lot. I think we can see there's a huge amount of order. We can understand it with our rational minds. I think that says something. It's beautiful. It's incredibly fruitful. I mean, we've been provided for in unbelievable ways if we look after it properly. So I think those kinds of things can give us some hints about what the being behind the universe might be like. I don't think we can find out anything more specific than that. I think you have to go to history, to our history of our interactions with God, person to person, if you like, and outside of science for the rest of the answers.
What do I discover as I explore creation? Just a sense of wonder and surprise. I discover a God who isn't tame, because it's never what I'm expecting. I think I discover a God who is beyond understanding, and that's the God I want. I want a God who is sublime, who is ununderstandable, who's wild, quite beyond the tame God who fits neatly into what I'm expecting. That's what I discover through discovering the natural world, and just being surprised on a consistent level, as much by other people's work as my own.
It's very, very tempting to say, here we are in the natural world, and in one way or another we can see God's footprint. And so classically, of course, Paley thought that organic arrangements indicated the creator's design. And this, of course, is changed into intelligent design, which I think is utterly, utterly mistaken. I should make that extremely clear. I think it's a very, very difficult question to answer, the extent to which you can see evidence of God, if you like, in the natural world. For the simple reason, first of all, that there are many extremely intelligent and likeable people who see absolutely no evidence for the agency of God in the natural world, and none of them are fools. I think it's naive to try and just read things as if this is simply, if you like, the book of nature is somehow also the book of God. But if I look at the natural world, I see that it's very highly ordered. I see that amongst other things it allows consciousness to emerge, and I see also that not only does it allow consciousness, but it allows people to understand things, to understand rational things, to understand logic, to understand mathematics, to create things themselves. And all of that I regard as being consistent with the existence of God. They're not knock-down arguments, they're not absolute proofs, because in another theological way, the majority of believers would say that fundamentally God is entirely unknowable. He's not us, with one perhaps critical exception.
I share the perspective that some writers in the Old Testament portion of the Bible seem to express very well. You know, in a poem called Psalm 19, the poet says, "The heavens declare the glories of God. The skies proclaim his handiwork." But I can say the same as I look through a microscope and look at embryos. For me, too, I think pondering these great works that I can observe in nature fills me with a sense of wonder and majesty. And oddly, thankfulness. And thankfulness is an attitude that you can really only express to a person. And for me, as I experience that feeling of thankfulness, I realize that there is a person whom I can thank, and that's God himself.